Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Township of North Frontenac's council meetings. I use plural for Thursday, June the 11th. First up on the agenda, we have our notice for recorded meetings. Please be advised, North Frontenac council meetings are recorded. By attending a public meeting of council, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded. Members of council, staff, delegates, and attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in inappropriate and or unacceptable behavior or comments. So the first meeting is a public meeting. The Council of the Township of North Frontenac is conducting a public meeting for a planning proposal under the Planning Act to consider proposed housekeeping amendments to update the zoning bylaw. This includes administrative updates to clarify intent, correct discrepancies, and eliminate redundancies, with the overall goal of improving the bylaw's usability and readability. Any person who wishes to receive a copy of the minutes of the public meeting, a copy of the report on the proposed amendments, or notice of the passing of the proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw should provide their full name, address, email address, and contact numbers to the clerk following the meeting. If you are attending the meeting in person, please add your information to the sign-in sheet located on the table by the door to the council chambers. If a person or a public body specified under the Planning Act does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of North Frontenac before the proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw being approved, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So we'll begin the meeting with our traditional land acknowledgement. We begin this gathering by acknowledging and celebrating these traditional lands as the gathering place of the first peoples and their ancestors who were entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. We do so respecting both the land and the Indigenous people who continue to walk with us through this world. Today, the Township of North Frontenac is committed to working with Indigenous peoples and all residents to pursue a united path of reconciliation. Okay, item 3, approval of the agenda. Brooke, please.
Moved by Councillor Haag, seconded by Deputy Mayor Kudo. Be resolved, the council approves the agenda for the public meeting regarding proposed amendment to the township's comprehensive zoning bylaw dated June 11th, 2026 as circulated.
Are there any comments? Seeing none, in favor? Carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in general nature thereof? Seeing none. 5, the administrative reports. Public meeting report for the 2026 housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment.
Moved by Councillor Haag, seconded by Deputy Mayor Kudo. Be it resolved, the council receives the planning report from Dmitry Kurilovich, Project Manager, Senior Planner, County of Frontenac, entitled Public Meeting Report, the 2026 Housekeeping Zoning Bylaw Amendment, and the council receives for consideration all public comments regarding the proposed amendment. And the council directs planning staff to make any necessary revisions and provide the draft bylaw to council at a future meeting for consideration.
Okay. Before we go any farther, Dimitri, you have a presentation, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council. My name is Dimitri. I am the senior planner at the County of Frontenac. The county, of course, provides day-to-day planning services to the Township of North Frontenac. So we provide advice and we help township staff with administrating all planning land use items, including the interpretation and the implementation of the township zoning bylaw. So today, what I'm bringing forward to you is a housekeeping amendment to the zoning bylaw. And so I just want to be clear that the purpose of this amendment is not to introduce any new development rules or any new development standards. A housekeeping amendment is exactly as the name suggests. It's intended to provide administrative changes and changes such as removal or modifications of definitions that are either redundant or not in use elsewhere in the bylaw. updates to various sections of the bylaw, specifically with modification to the text for the purposes of clarification and removal of redundancy in certain cases. And of course, the overall goal of any housekeeping amendment is to increase the usability of the zoning bylaw. So I'm going to provide a summary of what the bylaw amendment entails, and then I'm going to go over all the sections that are proposed to be amended with an explanation as to why those amendments are proposed. So to summarize, this amendment will remove some definitions that are not in use by the zoning bylaw. There are also amendments to existing definitions to remove the development standards from the definition itself and then place them into the section where development standards are supposed to live. We're also proposing some modification to the grammar or the syntax of the various sections and some of the provisions or the rules in the bylaw. We're also removing certain rules that are and issues that are now governed by other bylaws, such as kennels, to make sure we don't have overlapping regulations on one specific issue. We're also looking at providing additional explanations in various sections just to provide a little bit more clarity. One of the, I guess, major changes that I'd like to highlight is we're proposing to modify the section of the bylaw that prevents the expansion of non-complying dwellings without a planning application. So our proposal is to allow for the expansion of legal non-complying dwellings as long as those dwellings are not located within 30 meters of the water or wetland, and where those expansions to those dwellings do not further impact the non-complying setback or the thing that does not comply with the zoning bylaw. I'll explain a little bit more further on. And we're also proposing to remove a site-specific zone from a property at with 4 different addresses on it. It's 7357A, 7347, 7341, and 7325 Road 506. About half of that zone is the North of 7 restaurant. The reason for that is because that specific zone permits what's called a dining lounge, but a dining lounge is not defined in the zoning bylaw. That kind of creates a situation where when you don't have a definition, it creates some issues with interpretation. The dining lounge idea is already permitted as a restaurant use in the hamlet zone, so the HX3 zone is really just redundant. And the reality is that this HX3 zone was probably created a long time ago before restaurants were permitted as of right within the hamlet zone. So bear with me. These aren't the most exciting changes, but I'm going to go through them so that everybody is kind of aware of what's, what we're talking about here. So in terms of removal of definitions, we're proposing to remove the definition for aerodrome as well as airfield, private airfield. The reason for that is because those definitions are not explicitly permitted in any zone in the bylaw. And based on our training that we received from lawyers, it's the best thing to do in a zoning bylaw is to make sure that you do not include definitions or terms in your definition sections that are not referenced elsewhere in the bylaw. That kind of creates a little bit of confusion. So those 2 are proposed to be removed. There are going to be some changes to other definitions. So for example, boathouse, boatport, we're proposing to remove the maximum height from the definition because the actual height restriction already exists in the section that provides the rules or provisions specific to boathouse and boatport construction. So that's removal of redundancy. For dock, we're proposing to remove the provision that restricts additional development on structures on top of docks and add that into the actual section of the bylaw that speaks to how docks should be constructed. So we're just moving the development standard to the appropriate section. The same applies for the definition of natural vegetated buffer. We're removing the term 15 meters in depth and then putting that under or leaving it in section 3.29 that already applies to the natural vegetation buffer. So the 15-meter in-depth concept already exists in a separate section. So again, that's a removal of redundancy. Same applies for sleep cabins. So we're proposing to remove the provision related to size, and because it's already included in a separate section of the bylaw that speaks specifically to sleep cabins. And overall, as I mentioned, zoning bylaw best practices suggests that if there are specific rules or provisions or what we call development standards that govern a specific use, those should be included in the section that speaks to the development standards, not in the definition. So you define what it is, and then you talk about how that is to be implemented in a separate section. There's also another change to the definition of veterinary establishments. And the reason here is just to point to the animal control bylaw. So basically the definition is now going to point to the animal control bylaw as being the primary tool or the bylaw that regulates the use of kennels to make sure there's no, again, redundancy and overlap of regulations. In terms of the general provisions section, and this is section 3, this is where the development standards actually exist. So we are proposing to add boat port to any location that references a boathouse. Reason being, if you look at the definition section, a boathouse and a boat port are defined as pretty much the same type of building. So we just want to make it clear that when there are provisions in the bylaw that specifically speak to boathouses, they also apply to boat ports. We're also proposing to place the existing height exemption for agricultural buildings into its own subsection. It already exists now, but putting it into its own subsection will help it with referencing. We're also removing a reference to bylaw number 6822 in the section that speaks to backyard chickens and replacing that with animal control bylaw. And that allows us, that's what's called a dynamic reference. So if that bylaw number changes because that bylaw is amended in the future for whatever reason, we don't have to go back and change the zoning bylaw. Like the animal control bylaw will always be the animal control bylaw, regardless of what the number associated with it is. For section 322 that deals with illumination, in the title, we're adding of buildings and grounds. So it's going to read illumination of buildings and grounds to make it a little bit more clear as to what that section actually applies to. We're changing a little bit of the sentence structure in section 3.23 kennels, and that's specifically to provide clarity to say that kennels are now entirely regulated by the animal control bylaw and not by the zoning bylaw and the animal control bylaw. And then we are also organizing the permitted set of uses in section 3.25, which speaks to live work units, instead of having it as one large paragraph, and that's intended to obviously improve readability. In section 3.16A2.1, frontage and access for waterfront lots, we're removing a reference to section 3.31 because section 3.31 is not the correct section to reference when it comes to frontage and access. And in fact, the reference to section 3.32 already exists, so we're going to leave that as is. For the home-based businesses that are contemplated under section 3.21B, those, we are basically saying that those must comply with the parking sections of the bylaw. So that basically tells us that if you're thinking of home-based businesses, you have to look at the parking section to make sure that you are providing enough parking if you have a home-based business. So we're also modifying subsection references in section 3.29, natural vegetative buffer and waterfront activity area, and removing a preamble paragraph because the same preamble pretty much exists in the paragraph below. So there's just removing a little bit of redundancy. I just want to make it clear that this specific amendment does not impact any interpretation or implementation of the provision of the section. It's literally just like a copy and paste of the exact same thing, pretty much beside each other. In section 3.31J, parking and storage of motor vehicles, we are adding text that states that section 3.32 deals with the parking requirements. So specifically, if you're looking at parking under the storage of motor vehicles, you have to look at reference section 3.32. For The section that allows permitted projections into yard setbacks, we're adding a provision that basically says the permitted projections are not permitted to project into the 30-meter water body setback. And we're trying to create an explicit distinction between a yard setback and a water body setback. The reason why is because sometimes we have people coming in and saying, well, you allow permitted projections, so I want to build my deck a little bit closer, or my porch a little bit closer to the water. And we say, those are not the same thing. And we just want to make it sure that that is very explicit in this situation. And the reason it's not the same thing is because they're measured. It's a technical thing. I can explain it to you if you would like. But in most cases, the 30-meter setback is really what regulates how far development has to be from the water. It's not the yard setback. So change of sentence structure in section 3.37 related to recreation of vehicles on individual lots. And at that points the reader to the township's RV or recreation vehicle bylaw as the bylaw that regulates the use of RVs on lots. So we just want to make sure we're again not overlapping zoning and other specific bylaws to double up regulation. And then we're also changing the sentence structure in section 3.4 signs, and is just it's a little syntax change to improve readability. So we're also adding permissions to section 3.24 to allow for the expansion of legal non-conforming or complying structures when those structures are located outside of the required water body or wetland setback, being 30 meters, and where the existing deficiency is not further aggravated or impacted. So the reason for that is it allows structures with existing legally non-complying but deficient setbacks to expand without requiring a planning act, as long as that expansion does not occur within the water body setback or within the deficient setback. So for example, a non-waterfront, somebody wants to add on to a building that is not located on the waterfront, but they are too close to the property line. On the other side, they want to add the addition on the other side of where that deficiency exists. And right now they have to go through a planning process. We've had these applications come in the past, and we really do not see any reason why they should go through the planning process. Quite frankly, it's a waste of everybody's time. So the idea here is if you are proposing to construct an addition on the non-deficient side, and you're not further aggravating the non-complying issue, then you can proceed straight to building permit without requiring a planning application. And the idea here is that this amendment is intended to provide additional flexibility for the expansion of these types of structures in areas that do not pose a risk to what we call regulated natural heritage features such as lakes, rivers, or wetlands. So moving on to section 4, this deals specifically with zones. In section 4.1 zone classification, we are adding some text that will point readers to the county's online mapping platform to obtain the most up-to-date zoning maps. So basically, they'll just be able to click a hyperlink that takes them to Frontenac Maps, and then they can look up the zoning of the lot they're interested in. We're also adding a text that explains that the minimum lot standards that exist in each zone only apply to lots if you're looking to create new lots. It's not lots that have existed prior to this zoning bylaw coming into effect. This is not a change to how the zoning bylaw function. It's just something that will allow people to better understand what these minimum lot standards mean. Sometimes people come in, they have a lot that's existed for a long time. It's undersized compared to current standards, and they're under the opinion that they can't build. And that's not really the case. We do explain that to them, but at least this may save people some anxiety associated with reading some of the development rules that we have. We're also proposing to remove cemetery as a permitted use and then delete the corresponding regulations. This seems like a big change, but the reason for that is because this came out of training that staff received from the Bereavement Authority of Ontario, who is the agency that regulates the development and construction and regulation of cemeteries. The BAO advised staff that new cemeteries should really go through a comprehensive planning process, including a zoning bylaw amendment rather than just being permitted as of right. So this change is being taken directly from advice that was received from the BAO. And We're also proposing to remove references to kennels as a permitted use from various subsections in the bylaw, as the use is now regulated by the Township Animal Control Bylaw. Again, removal of redundancy. Then we're looking at a zoning change, a specific zoning change to a specific property. And I explained this at the beginning, but the purpose of this exception zone, HX3, is to permit, it's called a dining lounge. Dining lounge is not defined in the zoning bylaw. We can only assume it means restaurant. The restaurant is already permitted in the hamlet zone. We see absolutely no reason to maintain that HX3 zone. It only provides unnecessary I guess, confusion, another layer for people to have to look through to figure out what their property actually can be used for. And as I mentioned earlier, dining lounge was most likely put in as a permitted use back a long time ago, before this current zoning bylaw came into effect, which now permits restaurants as of right within the hamlet zone. So again, a removal of redundancy. And this is specifically the property that this zoning change will apply to. The black outline is the outline of the HX3 zone, and the white is the boundary of the lots. So there's two lots that are being. So next steps, we're looking to collect feedback from the public, council, and technical agencies. We've already received some feedback from technical agencies at this point. Once that feedback is all collected, we'll look at it, we'll consider it, and then revise the proposed amendments based on the feedback that has been received. And then we will bring forward an amending bylaw to council for consideration at a future meeting. So thank you.
Dimitri? Brooke, can you read that resolution again, please?
Moved by Councillor Hague, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hudol. Be it resolved, the council receives the planning report from Dimitri Kurilovich, Project Manager, Senior Planner, County of Frontenac, entitled Public Meeting Report for the 2026 Housekeeping Zoning Bylaw Amendment, and that council receives for consideration all public comments regarding the proposed amendment, and that council directs planning staff to make any necessary revisions and provide the draft bylaw to council at a future meeting for consideration.
Thank you. Any comments from council? Councillor Inglis and Councillor Fowler.
Dimitri, there's no definition for private airstrip or airdrome. So the fact that one exists on a property in North Frontenac, and what does it mean to take it out of the definition? How would a person, for example, create a new private airstrip?
Thank you for the question. So through the mayor, the private airstrips are always a little bit of a tricky one. There's not a lot of tools that municipalities can use to regulate private airstrips. A lot of that is regulated by the federal government. But the assumption is that, so right now, the private airstrips are defined and the airdromes are defined, but they're not regulated at all in the zoning bylaw. So either way, if somebody wanted to come in and put one on their property, they would still have to go through the zoning amendment process. So if somebody did want to put one in, they would still come in for a zoning amendment. They would just need to add a definition to the zoning bylaw specifically for their property. It's, yeah.
Mr. Fowler? That was my question. Councillor Hague.
I don't know if Dimitri is the right person or maybe staff regarding the residential waterfront development, the amendment. I know it's not required, but will the lake associations and the public be made knowledgeable of this change when it's approved?
Thank you for the question. I think I'll just pass it on to township staff, because I'm not sure what your notification requirements are like for lake associations and stuff. But I think, I mean, it's a zoning bylaw amendment, so it's there is a public circulation that goes out after this application has moves through the process, whether it's approved or denied.
So we do circulate to the prescribed bodies that we posted the public notice in the Frontenac News. It's been on the township website. We posted notice on our own social media site, letting people know that there was a zoning bylaw amendment.
and that, wanted additional information to contact us. Provide them, Dimitri's report when it was available. So in terms of sending it to specific associations, we don't do that, but we certainly do get it out public.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? So all in favor of this resolution? Hang on. This part, all in favor of this resolution? Carried. Now we come to the public comment. Is there anyone in the in the council chamber that wishes to make a comment about these proposed changes? Seeing none. Kelly, is there anyone online who would like to make comments?
So if there's anybody online that wishes to make a comment, please use the raise hand feature. Seeing none.
Thank you. That brings us to the adjournment.
Moved by Counselor Hague, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hudel. Be it resolved, the council adjourns the public meeting at 5:26 PM.
Any final comments? Seeing none, in favor? Opposed? Carried, the meeting is closed. Meeting called to order 5:27 PM. Approval of the agenda.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Hudel, seconded by Counselor Inglis. Be it resolved, the council approves the agenda dated June 11th, 2026 as amended.
Any comments? In favor? We have an agenda, thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in general nature thereof? Seeing none. Item 4 is a business profile, 9 North Golf Course.
Moved by Counselor Inglis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hudel. Be it resolved, the council receives for information business profile of 9 North Golf Course provided by the Economic Development Task Force.
Comments? In favor? Carried. Presentation, we have a Senior of the Year Award. I have known this lady since I've become a mayor. And she's become quite a fixture in my mind about what she does with the Lions Club, but especially the food bank. So many people rely on the hard work that she does. So I'd like to award this year's 2026 Senior of the Year Award to Lois Ena. Lois? My fingers and passcode, not the same thing. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We are now into item 5, a presentation. I'm sorry, we're into 6 delegations. Clarendon Central Public School Parent Council. Who's doing the presentation? Okay, sure. You come up here and ladies, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Angela Tooley. I'm one of the co-chairs for Clarendon Central Public School Parent Council. Tonight, we're gonna, oh, God. Here's an outline of what we're gonna talk about tonight. We're gonna cover some background on the school, who we are as parent council concerns, the community value that goes along with our school, along with what makes Clarendon Central Public School unique, our geographic location, community, and school structure, and finally, our request to council. Just a quick overview, Clarendon Central has been part of this community since 1960 when it was first built. We currently have 33 students enrolled. We have the ability to house 72 students. We currently have 2 classrooms set up at Clarendon right now, a junior and a senior classroom. We serve all of North Frontenac, Ampa, Ardagh, and Plubna. We receive funding from the provincial government as well as the Township of North Frontenac, Parent Council support, generous donations from people like the Lions Club of Land O'Lakes, Clarendon Miller volunteers, and local businesses and community members. Clarendon Central Parent Council, we partner with teachers, parents, and school admin to help raise funds to help cover costs such as school trips, outdoor equipment, lots of stuff. Generally, teachers will come to the meeting and whatever they request, we typically cover. We provide volunteer support for skills coaching, the musical activities at the school, and hot lunches. We actively raise funds for the school, student projects, and advocate for student educational needs. This covers what we've raised funds for in the last 3 years alone. We've raised about 21,000, and that's just parent council alone. Last year, we've received a $10,000 donation from the Lions Club as well as $2,000 annually from the North Frontenac. This just shows a couple of things we have purchased out of our pocket for the school. 2023, you can see a gazebo for the schoolyard, track and field supplies, support for student interest groups. 2024 to 25, we paid the whole cost of year-end field trips. We paid for our kids to go to the Skills Ontario competition. We had a group of kids make it to the provincial level for carpentry, so that was really nice to see. We also bought an interactive whiteboard for the senior class. This year, we've done Lexia subscriptions, skills competition, and Chromebook purchases. We've been waiting on some basketball court updates, which we have just found out the school is actually covering, so we will have extra funds to put elsewhere. So why are we here tonight? We're here tonight because we've noticed an ongoing trend of resources being pulled from our school. So starting back in 2014, there was a consolidation from 3 classes down to 2, which meant we lost 1 full-time teacher. The EA position has been reduced from 2 full-time EAs to a 0.5 position over the last, I think it was 5 to 8 years. The senior class teaching allotment was reduced from a full-time teacher in 2024 to a 0.71 teaching assignment. And at the same time, they pulled the Empower Reading Support Program, so remedial support for students who needed some extra help with their reading. And this has happened despite relatively consistent enrollment over the last 5 years, which I think for us is the concerning part, right? We have a net decrease of 2 students over 5 years, but we've lost EA support, and we've lost teacher support, and we've lost the Empower Reading Program. So I think that in itself shows a trend in I guess the direction we don't want to see. The school board did a study in 2016 that was like a 15-year plan for schools. And as part of that, They never mentioned in the report closing Clarendon Central, but they have showed that by 2030, all of the students that had been previously at Clarendon are assigned to Breck then. So I think we can maybe draw some conclusions about what they were thinking there, even though it's not written out. We have noticed, I guess the other important piece is the utilization rate. So they strive for a utilization rate. So the number of students out of the total capacity of about 80%. We're at 46% right now. They're predicting, their dashboards show that they're predicting a decrease to 30% within the next 5 years. And that kind of aligns with what we're seeing as well, where our primary class is down to, I think, 7 students. There was 1 new kindergarten this year and no new kindergarten students registered for next year. I think all of those things together just leave us in a spot where we need some support in advocating to keep the school funded and operating. So I think I probably don't need to tell you, we all know that the school is a valuable community resource, and there are organizations all across the province that have recognized that rural schools are at risk, and with all the cuts to education funding, maybe feeling the impact a little harder than the schools in more urban areas. So we have connected with the Rural Schools Matter group. They were Southern Frontenac County. They actually did, I think it was about 7 or 8 years ago, they were dealing with the same thing in Yarker. And so Stone Mills Township commissioned a report that actually quantified the economic and social impacts on the township as a whole, not just from a school perspective. So we reached out to them and they're sending their information to help support what we're doing. And I think it's just important to recognize that the impact is felt just beyond the 3 of us and our families and the others in the school community. There's, we lose the school or we lose access to quality education. We see families leaving the area. We see a loss of employment just with those cuts to teacher positions and buses and everything else. It's a loss of a community resource, right? I mean, we see each other, we see all of you at spaghetti dinners and the Christmas pageants and everything else. And so losing the school means losing that sense of connectivity in the township. And then just the impact on our students and the academics and shipping them to Charlotte Lake or some alternative, especially for our younger students where just personally, my oldest daughter gets on the bus at 7 and she gets home at 4. And it's okay if you're in high school, but for our younger students, that's a hardship and a significant impact on them. So we've said that there are provincial, acknowledge that there are cuts to provincial funding and that has left school boards in a position where they're making really difficult decisions about how they're going to resource and provide for schools now and moving forward. So I think our approach has been that Clarendon Central is a little bit different than some of our urban counterparts. And that's really just based in the structure of the school and the resources that are available in the community and the community demographics. So our specific request to the school board for the upcoming year has been to increase the 0.7 teaching position back to a full-time teaching assignment. And that's based on the structure of the school. So as Angela said, there are 2 classes in the school. So junior kindergarten to grade 3, grade 4 to 8. That senior class has grown in enrollment from 17 students in 2024-25 to 26 students this year. And just based on what we're looking at, we see that being consistent next year as well. So if we go back to what I talked about earlier, 24-25, we had 1 full-time teacher in that class. So now they're teaching 50% more students with 30% less time allocated to teaching in that classroom. The reduction in EA support has meant that EA is spending the bulk of their time in the primary class where they're more needed just by the nature of the student needs and the younger children. And that's left the senior teacher teaching without support in the classroom. I think we can all imagine it's difficult to teach 5 grades across all the subjects every day. So we have a teacher teaching all of those students and more diverse learning needs than we have had in the past. The follow then is stripping of the academic supports. So the removal of the reading program is one thing, but the teacher accommodating or managing a classroom with that many more students leaves them with less time to provide enrichment opportunities or support to the students who might need it most. And the last part that we've noticed as parent council is just a high teacher turnover in that position. So you're offering it as a less than full-time position in a location that not everybody wants to work, right? So we go back to last school year, they had 4 teachers in 5 months. And that is only like the longer term assignments. That doesn't count like day-to-day subs that they may have had rotating through to bridge those gaps. So it leads to challenges meeting the curriculum standards because the teacher's rotating all the time, classroom management challenges, which affect all of our learners, and just a lack of stability. The kids go to school and they don't know how long that teacher's going to be there. That teacher-student relationship can be really important to some of our students, and it's, you know, it's severed repeatedly over a few months. So our students don't have access to board resources. So LDSB offers programs like French Immersion, the Gifted program, the LEAP program, which I can't remember what it stands for, but it's for students who learn better with art, more of an artistic or arts and music focus, and the Atlas program, which supports students who have difficulties in a regular classroom due to executive functioning issues or difficulties with executive function and processing. If we look back over the last 5 years, we have not had a single student from Clarendon participate in any of those programs. So just by nature of our location, they're offered, I think the closest ones are Harrowsmith, Loughborough, and Sydenham. So just simply too far for our students to be able to access it. And that really extends beyond the school board and what the school board offers. If we look at the more urban students in places like Kingston or maybe Toronto, where they have access to museums and field trips and after-school clubs and athletics, our students just don't have those same opportunities. And it's documented in research that even if you take away everything else and you compare students in a rural setting to students in an urban setting, those students don't have the same level of academic achievement. And it can be partially attributed just to those external supports and resources. So it's really important that our students are appropriately supported in the classroom so that they're not further disadvantaged from their more urban peers. And then our last one is just the community demographic. So again, widely supported by research that students who come from families of low socioeconomic status are often struggle to achieve on par with their higher socioeconomic status peers. That's especially true in areas where we see generational poverty. So the student population at the school mirrors that of the community. And if we look at North Frontenac, we have 15% of our residents that don't hold a certificate, a diploma, or a degree, compared to 10% across the province. We have the lowest median household income in the county and the highest unemployment rate. And so the correlation, I think, is generally thought to be related to access to resources, right? So they just don't have the same access to, or may not have the same access to technology or enrichment opportunities as some of their peers. And so making sure that those students are supported within the school setting and the school is appropriately resourced is essential for student success. So what have we done as parent council? We've reached out to the school board and to the board of trustees, and we have been offered a meeting in hopefully the next week or two, to talk about the staffing for the fall. And we've reached out to our MPP as well, acknowledging that education falls at the provincial level and hoping for their support. So what is our specific request to you? The township has supported the school in the past, and I know many of you are huge advocates for the school and for access to education in the community. So we're hoping that you'll consider endorsing our request that the school board look at staffing and EA allocations at the school, and then support our request to restore that senior class position to a full-time position. And then just anything you can do to assist with communicating our requests at the provincial level would be helpful. And that's all we have. If you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Okay, Councilor Fowler first. Thanks for the presentation. I find it a little scary on the little kids that would have to be bused great distances, get up really early in the morning and stay on a bus for an hour or whatever it takes. I think that's would be pretty dramatic on it. The other thing is that do you have people assisting the teachers during the day there, like volunteers, people that step in and help out?
Not many. I know, like we mentioned, there used to be 2 EAs, and I know when one retired, one actually came back and did a reading program every Monday with them. I'm not sure if she still does that. We used to do hot lunches, so come in once a week and do hot lunches, but as you can imagine, our resources, most of us, all of us work full-time jobs, so we can't be coming back once a week to do stuff like that. So stuff that we do is typically after hours now, like the spaghetti dinner, but as far as I know, we don't have a lot of volunteers. We do have interest groups that happen for 2 months, usually in the winter, and parent volunteers run those, but that's a kind of a once a week commitment for 8 weeks.
And I think just to your first point, we don't have any indication that the school is closing. I think we're just making sure that everybody's on the same page, that there's been no discussion of actually closing it. It's just the trend that we see of pulling resources from the school at this point.
And that would choke you out eventually too.
That's right.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you very much for your presentation. I can sense the passion for your kids there, and it's important that we keep the school. And I think anything that council can endorse would help that, and especially meeting with Mr. Jordan. I like your comment that your contacted Rural School Matters, because they can be a big advocate for you in Queens Park. So I think it's very important that you connect with them and see what they can do, because that's your voice down at Queens Park. As you mentioned, it's a provincial mandate, but I think this council, anything we can do, a letter, anything like that, but I'm sure we can do that.
Anyone else? Okay, let me, sorry, Councilor Ingles, and then we get.
So are we going to recommend an action here? For example, a letter from the mayor or a visit from the mayor to the MPP?
You're ahead of yourself, because I've already written it out.
Give.
Okay. Right.
And just one other concern I have, and I know this wasn't part of the presentation, but it's been very important to the school, is when I sit down there at North of Seven and have lunch or breakfast or something like that, and I see the kids walking down the street to go there, and I see everyone whipping by at 70, 80 kilometers an hour, that has to stop. And I know we can't figure that out right now, but I think in a future council meeting, we have to figure out a way to slow those people down there, because somebody's going to get hurt.
We can take care of that, Corey, with a call. We've done it before, okay. Couple things. First of all, I know you contacted Jordan's office, MPP Jordan's office, and they told you that not now, but later. So I thought I might be able to make a difference. So I contacted them and said, will you just listen to it? You don't have to do anything, whatever. And no, they won't do that, but they have agreed to meet with me after their collective bargaining is complete. So I would like to, you're gonna have to guide me through this. I always mess this up. So I want to amend the resolution as is in the table. Basically, it just says we're thanking you for being here. And then I want to add, and endorses the parent council's request that, I'm going to give you this. The Limestone District School Board staffing educational system allocations declaring, endorsing the parent council's request that Limestone District School Board review the impact of staffing and educational assistance allocations declared in Central, and support the request to restore the current 0.71 FTE senior class teacher to a 1 FTE and communicate the unique needs of Clarendon Central Public School to MPP John Jordan and request support for access to academic and student support resources. I'm afraid if we don't do this, this is just going to get kind of lost in the whatever vapor it is. So this is an amendment, right? You can have that. That's why I printed it off, so. Okay. Well, this is part of the process. So while we're here, while we're doing that, I want to talk a little bit about money. Everybody's on the same page. 2 years ago, the township operates a community grant program with $10,000. 2 years ago, we said, why is the school having to apply for it? We took the first 1,000 out of it, give it to the school. No questions asked, no justification, here's the first 1,000. Reduces the others to $9,000 pot. So you're probably getting more this way than you would trying to 5%. At the same time, last year, we said, well, it's not balanced between us and Clarendon Central and NAEC. So we put $1,000 in the budget and the two of them together balance off of $100. So if you're getting 2,000 from two pots. Now, if I'm fortunate enough to be back here again, I would like to relook at how we can do that to somehow increase this. I have some ideas, but nothing is easy. And when we give a dollar here, we're going to great lengths to balance everything, food banks, community services, and now the school, that was the last one. I want to make sure we don't off balance. So we haven't gone very far from that last, you're always there. And if you ever want something, you can either ask the counselors or I will come to for you.
I think too, as parent council, we're a small group, but we're very mighty, and any fundraisers we do generally bring us a lot of money, and that's because of our community support. So the money is greatly appreciated, but in my opinion, the backing of the school is way more important. At this point, busing is a fortune, so the $1,000 automatically goes to end of year busing, so that teachers know they have that money to go towards their field trips. But for instance, it was like $400 to just take a small bus from Clarendon out to Charlotte Lake, just for a few kids to do the skills competition. As parent council, we have the money to fund that. We need to make sure the school stays. So whatever you guys can do to help with that, that's bigger than any monetary.
I think that whenever we have talked about Clarendon Central, we're all on the same page with supporting that road.
I want to mention two things. Look at other opportunities for busing because part of the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority, they do a whole bunch of education outreach programs. They have programs that will help you with the busing. So reach out to them. And the other question I have, you talked about French immersion. You have a French teacher here, do you? Or we do? Okay, but it's not French immersion, it's just core French. Yeah.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Hudol, seconded by Councillor Inglis. Be it resolved, the council receives for information the presentation for Clarendon Central Public School, PCPS, Parent Council, request for support, and thanks them for their time spent today. And that council endorses the Parent Council's request that Limestone District School Board review the impact of staffing and educational assistant allocation at CCPS, and that council supports the request to restore the current 0.71 FTE senior class teacher to a 1.0 FTE, and that council supports communicating the unique needs of CCPS to MPP John Jordan and the request for support for access to academic and student support resources.
Any final comments, council? In favor? That motion is carried. Thank you so much for coming in and making your case. You want to do this? Okay, that takes us to item 7, adoption of the minutes. Okay, if you want to leave, you can. If you want to stay, you're more than welcome. Okay? Up to you. Okay, adoption of minutes.
Moved by Counselor Inglis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Feudal. Be it resolved that council adopts the minutes of a meeting held May 21st, 2026 as circulated.
Comments? In favor? Carried. Okay. Item 8, visitors arising, there is none. On item 9. Item 9A, Clerk's Administrative Report, Communication Section A.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Feudal, seconded by Counselor Inglis. Be it resolved that council receives for information Section A items of the Clerk's Administrative Report entitled Communications of Interest.
Comments? In favor? Carried. Item B, Communications B, action item, B1.
Moved by Counselor Fowler, seconded by Deputy Mayor Feudal. Be it resolved that council receives for information the council resolution passed by the municipality for Calvin requesting a provincial review of current value assessment, CVA, based apportionment for shared municipal and provincially mandated services, and that North Frontenac Council supports the request for the province to undertake a review of policies, legislation, and regulations governing the use of CVA and weighted assessment as the basis for apportioning provincially mandated levies and shared municipal service costs, and that council supports consideration of alternative or hybrid apportionment models that better reflect rural realities and service access, and that this resolution be provided to the Premier of Ontario, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Rural Affairs, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the Rural Ontario Municipal Association, and MPP John Jordan.
Comments? So I looked this up. Where is Calvin? It's up near Mattawa. It is only 230 households and 140 square, 140 square kilometers. We're 1,100. But it's, let's just say, I think it's a worthwhile thing, but if we're going to look at it, we should benefit with smaller if it goes through John.
Why has this not appeared on our radar independently in the past? Like, I don't see any reason not to vote for it, but if I vote for it, it means, it's not something I would have thought about in the past. Never appeared here independently.
Anybody else? In favor of the resolution? Carried. Letter from Honorable Robert J. Black, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Moved by Counselor Fowler, moved by Deputy Mayor Feudal, seconded by Counselor Fowler. Be it resolved that council receives for information a letter from the Honorable Robert J. Black, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, advising the provincial government has introduced the proposed Protecting Ontario Streets and Communities Act 2026 to introduce tools to address zoning bylaw contraventions and enable municipalities to use an administrative monetary penalty AMP system for contraventions relating to land uses that are not permitted, and that council supports the proposed bill in principle and instructs the clerk to provide comments prior to the deadline of June 25th, 2026, including the following. Council support is conditional on funding support as North Frontenac does not have the necessary infrastructure. Rural settings should be taken into consideration as a one-size schedule of penalties does not fit all municipalities and may not work as in urban centers.
Comments? Counselor Fowler.
Yeah, when I see this, administrative monetary penalties going out, it's basically taken on the authority of, laying charges against people and fining them, but you're not going through the big process with the court system. That's the only issue I have with it. I know for Hamstone, because we're a smaller, township and things like that, but it's just something about that rubs me the wrong way.
Is this the act that was brought in to clear encampment?
I don't think so. This act hasn't been introduced yet. I mean, we just.
No, but was it proposed by the current government to make it easier for municipalities to clear encampment? I think recall and use that in a case that.
Yeah. No, it's, which counselor brought this forward? Was it Mike? You want to talk to this at all?
Sure. What is it? What is it that you'd like to know? I read the resolution, I read what they're proposing, and I think it's not fair that, how it is today. So what this is, in there, this is how it should be. However, our resources as a township, they cannot enforce us or put on us the full burden of financing the act. That's
The way it is right now, if we are become aware of, however that comes about, of an infraction, we go and we talk to the people who are to rectify the issue. But if we don't, then we have to invest a lot of dollars and cents and time and legal fees. Every time you talk to a lawyer, it's like, hello. And you know, and then you could end up in court for $200 and you've spent $3,000 or $4,000. So I look at this as kind of like a parking ticket. The parking ticket's $35 and you pay it. And if you want to fight it, you can go to court. But that's up to them. But you have to pay that ticket. That may not be quite the analogy, but that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. That's the follow.
Well, if you get a parking ticket, you can go to court. You get a traffic ticket, you can go to court.
We can't hear.
Sorry. If you get a traffic ticket, you can pay it or go to court. But still the structure is within the Ontario Court of Justice. The structure is there. This is not under that Ontario Court of Justice. It hasn't. If somebody refuses to pay it, what are you going to do? Take it off their taxes? That's not fair either.
The risk of running into a lot of public scrutiny on this. Just going to call a vote on this. Do we support this enough that we're encouraging to keep going with and see where it ends up? So all in favor of the motion as presented? Opposed? Motion is not passed. Defeated. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item 10A, County of Frontenac Manager, Community Planning and Clerk Planning Manager, draft of a new site plan control bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Deputy Mayor Kudo. Be it resolved that council receives for information the administrative report prepared by the Manager of Community Planning and the Clerk Planning Manager entitled Draft of a New Site Plan Control Bylaw, and the council directs planning staff to make any necessary revisions and provide the draft bylaw to council at a future meeting for consideration.
Comments? In favor? Carried.
Excuse me. I thought we were going to have a presentation.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have some slides to share because I know council doesn't deal with site plan control that often, but I also know this isn't a formal public meeting for the issue. So it's entirely at council's discretion. I can do the presentation or not. I can also just answer questions if there are questions.
Okay, council, what do you think? Show of hands, who wants to see the presentation? Who would rather not see the presentation? It's a loaded question. I knew what the answer was going to be. It's called democracy, right? Go ahead, Sonia.
Okay, thank you. I'm just gonna share my screen here. I'll be quick, I promise. There we go. Okay, thank you. Good evening, members of council and ladies and gentlemen in the public. My name is Sonia Bolton. I'm the manager of community planning for the County of Frontenac, and my team at the county has the privilege of helping and do planning services for the township as well. So I'm here tonight to talk to you about something called site plan control. It is a tool under the Ontario Planning Act that's used by municipalities to ensure details about specific development on certain properties for certain types of development. So it's to make sure that the development of the land is designed appropriately, that it's safe and functional for people using the site, that you're minimizing impacts to neighboring properties, and that the municipality standards for developing land are respected. So the site plan control process where it sits, there's the community's official plan along with any secondary plans you might have, and that's your overarching policy document for how your community is going to grow, change, develop, or otherwise over the course of the 25-year period. Then you have the zoning bylaw, which are the legal rights that people have on for their land in terms of what they're allowed to do, what uses they can have, how tall their buildings can be, how far from lot lines, those kinds of details. And then there are other tools within the Planning Act that talk about the division of land and how actual sites get developed. And that's where site plan control falls into place. And I guess the one thing that I would say is we've talked about this earlier this year because I've been working with township staff to update the site plan control bylaw, which I'm here to talk to you about tonight. But we found that some of those policies in your official plan also needed to be updated. And that really wasn't through any fault of the townships. It's just the province has had a great interest in planning over the last several years and has made numerous changes to the Planning Act. So we just, not only do we need to update the bylaw, we needed to update the official plan policies. Having a site plan control bylaw isn't anything new for you. You actually have one right now. So it's bylaw 2021. It was passed in 2020. And at the same time, you also passed a second bylaw that was specifically about site plan securities. So a site plan security, that's basically additional money from the applicant that's held by the municipality to ensure that the work on the property is done in according to the agreement that's set up between the township and the property owner. It's not taken in all cases, but sometimes for bigger developments, it's good to have, once the development is completely finished, the applicant applies back to the municipality and the monies are returned to them. But so I had a situation once where somebody entered into an agreement, they paid their securities, they dug a giant hole on a property, they fenced it off for safety, but then the rest of their financing fell through and they couldn't proceed with it. And so the community sat with a giant hole it was not a remote rural community, it was a downtown of a village or a sort of moderate sized urban center. And the city, gave them grace for a couple of years and then finally had to use the security money to hire a contractor to come in and fill the hole for health and safety reasons. And then, so that's what the securities are used for. We don't generally take them for smaller projects, but for bigger projects, it is good to have so that if something like that has to happen, where the municipality has to move in, then they're using monies from the applicant and not from your own taxes. So what we are recommending through this update to your site plan control bylaw is that you take those two bylaws and you put them into one. You can talk about securities all in the same bylaw, and it's just cleaner and easier for staff to implement. So in terms of what can be addressed through site plan control, you can look at the design of the site, including accessibility, the massing and design of any proposed buildings, the relationship of a proposed building to adjacent buildings that already exist, anything to do with access, so that's driveways, parking, loading facilities, bicycle parking, anything related to servicing and drainage and grading on a property that might impact an adjacent property, landscaping, lighting, and on-site waste facilities. So where are they storing the garbage and recycling? One of the big ones that we as planners always remind people of is that we live in Canada and Canada has winter and often a lot of snow. And where, when you plow your lot, are you putting your snow? And no, you can't put it in accessible parking spaces. So you actually have to design your site for your users to have snow storage as well. And the site plan control process is one of there's a couple of types of applications under the Planning Act that allows a municipality to take a road widening from a property owner. So you have municipal standards for how wide your roads should be. If the road is deficient and somebody is proposing site plan control or a consent, the municipality has the opportunity to take that extra sliver of land to make the right of way as wide as it should be for public health and safety reasons. So the types of development that site plan control will apply to, it's very similar to what you have right now. So it's generally commercial uses, so recreational tourism, campgrounds, trailer parks, golf courses, industrial uses like contractors' yards, institutional uses, so community facilities, long-term care homes, and multiple residential uses. So not just generally single-family detached, but the number of dwelling depends on the location, and I'll get to that in a minute. And it's also become quite common for municipalities to regulate private parking lots. So generally, when you have a use such as a business or a multi-residential facility, you're going to have accessory parking. But once in a while, you get somebody who wants to just have the principal use of a lot be parking. And the reason you want to have site plan control apply to that is because generally they move in and they clear everything and they might pave it or they put gravel, and that can cause drainage issues for neighboring properties. So if somebody is, it's nothing wrong with wanting to have a commercial private parking lot. You just want to make sure that they're doing it in such a way as they're not impacting their neighbors. So also, in terms of the new bylaw, we're looking at, so right now, most agricultural uses are exempt. Two common ones that are not exempt and that we're proposing that you make sure you cover in your bylaw are intensive livestock facilities. So those are like the big pig farms, chicken farms, and those are just because of nuisance complaints and land use impacts on neighboring properties because of the scale of them. The other are sort of other agricultural related uses, agritourism, on-farm diversified uses that involve commercial or manufacturing uses, or they offer goods and services that draw people to the site. They have events, they need parking, they need bathroom facilities. So they're using larger quantities of water than it's normally used by a farm. So say a brewery, this is a little brewery in Prince Edward County, for example. So there are exemptions. So generally, we don't apply site plan control to single residential uses. And right now, so the province did change the rules that you cannot use site plan control for fewer than 10 or fewer uses for residential units, except unless it's within 120 meters of a water body or a regulated water feature, or 300 meters of a rail line, but I don't think there's a rail line here, so that's not an issue. So it's useful in some situations. As staff, we generally don't have a desire to regulate single detached uses. There really isn't a need. There is this sort of a hook in here that every once in a while, if you end up next to a known archaeological deposit, if you end up because you need an agreement to deal with steep slopes, or then staff could use this, but it would be very site specific and on an issue specific basis. So other exemptions would be B&Bs with 3 or fewer rooms for rent, minor additions to existing non-residential buildings provided the maximum square footage doesn't exceed 2,500 square feet, agricultural uses other than the 2 that I just mentioned, public works or utilities, classroom portables, and then structures for flood erosion control. Pardon me. So changes to the Planning Act through Bill 109 back in 2022 now require the council municipality to delegate the authority to approve a site plan control application to municipal staff. So you approve the bylaw, but any applications have to be approved by staff, and you have a separate bylaw that you passed in 2024 that delegates that authority to your clerk planning manager. That's not proposed to change as part of that amendment, and it's literally right in the act. So I did when it was put through by the province, I did ask the question, and they basically said you either delegate it to staff or you don't do it at all. So unfortunately, there's no other middle ground or option to bring anything to council related to site plan control. The idea is that you control the site plan control bylaw, you control the zoning bylaw. If it complies with zoning, then it's just working out the details of where things go on a site, and it's supposed to be pretty minor. And the other piece to site plan control is there is an agreement that's entered into between the municipality and with the property owner, and then it's registered on title to the property, so it lives with the property. And it references any applicable drawings or studies, and it also will outline any securities that are required. So that's the purpose of those agreements. So in terms of next steps, what's presented to you tonight is a draft for review and comment. We haven't received any feedback or anything from the public, but I mean, it's not been, there's no requirement for notification of a public meeting for a site plan control bylaw. But we're happy to receive any feedback people want to give us, and then the intent is to revise the bylaw and bring it back to council at a future date. Thank you.
Sure.
Sonia, why does the rural cooperative zone have a blanket requirement for site plan control? Whereas the definition seems to be 10 or more residential units.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's an excellent question. I haven't looked at that policy in a while, so I would have to review that. But it was probably in place before the province made that change. So my answer to that would be the newer provision from the province would apply to anything site specific.
Will that mean, does that require a rewriting of the zoning bylaw to remove that from the RC zone? The rural cooperative zone?
Through you, Mr. I'd have to have another look at it. I mean, the cooperative exists. So it's not being proposed as new. I'd have to look at how it's worded in order to see whether there was anything that needed to be done with it. I apologize. I'd forgotten that there was something in there about site plan control, and so I didn't review it in advance of tonight.
It might be worth flagging because there is, of course, the other application in Palmerston Lake for a rural co-op zone. And I assume they're not asking for 10 residential units. Which according to this rule would be the where it kicks in, that you need a site plan control.
Through you, Mr. That's correct, because it is a waterfront property. Site plan control would apply to it. And because this is not being decided upon tonight, I will have a look at the one for the cooperative, and I can address that in my final report to council.
Thank you.
Okay, unless someone objects, I think we already had the vote on this. And we passed it. Is everybody clear with that? Okay, all right, just want to be sure. Item 10B, deeming bylaw required for shore road allowance closure, Kurt.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Hudol, seconded by Councillor Fowler. Be it resolved, the council receives the clerk planning manager's administrative report entitled deeming bylaw required for shore road allowance closure, occur, and the council will consider deeming bylaw later in the meeting.
Any comments? In favor? Carried. Okay, item 10C, 2026 OACA conference, deputy clerk, assistant to the planning manager.
Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hudol. Be it resolved, the council receives for information the deputy clerk assistant to the planning manager's administrative report entitled 2026 OPA conference, May 10th to the 13th, 2026.
Comments? You always do such great reporting. You always do.
Thank you. I learn a tremendous amount at those conferences, so it's nice to just share with everybody.
In favor of the resolution? Carried. Item 10D, proposed increase of $5 weekly for the assistant fire chief position.
Moved by Councillor Inglis, seconded by Councillor Hermer. Be it resolved, the council receives for information the Director of Emergency Services, Fire Chiefs Administrative Report entitled Update, Proposed Increase of 5 hours weekly for the Assistant Fire Chief position. And the council approves adding an additional 5 hours per week for a total of 30 hours per week, the Assistant Fire Chief position. And that the additional cost was included in the 2026 budget deliberations for council's consideration.
Comments?
Adam, when does this become full-time position? How many hours a week is that?
Mr. Mayor, through you, 30 hours for me would be the ceiling. I don't believe we would require any more than 30 hours. Does that answer your question or?
Well, I'm guessing that full-time is 37 and a half.
I would have to research and get back to you. I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
Full-time in that position would be 30 hours.
Well, we looked at this at the time of budget. And we said, well, we're only gonna do the first half up to, So now, and then the fire chief would go back and say, if he needed the extra five, then we would look at it again. So here we are. So any final comments? In favor? There you go. Okay. That takes us to item 10E, procurement policy update.
Moved by Counselor Inglis, seconded by Counselor Hermer. Be it resolved, the council receives for information that the treasurer's administrative report entitled Procurement Policy Update, and that council will consider a bylaw later in the meeting.
Comments? Counselor Haig? Hang on, Mike.
Sorry?
Okay. So from now on, when we do like an agenda, I need to know if there's a presentation coming. I don't know that, but it's usually too late. So, okay, so let me go to Kelly first. That's the one. Yeah, and then Megan.
All right, so I did prepare a presentation if you want to do that, or I can just take questions.
Maybe you should just come up and do the presentation or do it from there, whatever works for you.
I did prepare a presentation, just, it is a big document to go through, so not so scary, not as. Okay, so the purpose of the procurement policy is to establish the rules governing the procurement of goods and services. Really what we want to ensure is we have openness, fairness, accountability, transparency, and then looking after the financial best interest of the township is that. So the challenges that we've seen under our current policy, it is 10 years old. So we had some with bid bonds. Right now, our policy is more stringent than legislation. That has caused some local people to maybe not bid, or other people not bid due to a bid bond requirement. Under the Construction Act, it kicks in at 500,000. We were sitting at 100,000 for bid bonds and requiring some bid deposits for procurement over 20,000. Also, our thresholds are quite low now. We looked at cost of living and the changes in the last 10 years. So it requires us then to do more tendering, which is labor intensive process without that positive outcome by looking at the tender process. Equipment purchases, we've seen the struggle where vendors are just not interested in doing a detailed tender document to buy a trailer and things like that. So we're not, again, not seeing the value in putting the effort into the tendering document. We're having to call people and say, like, are you going to bid? Please, submit a bid. So we've run into some challenges there. We recently, the Buy Ontario Act has come in. I do have a couple slides to talk a little more about that. So that's going to cause some new changes. So we want to make sure that was incorporated in the current policy. Over budgets. So we've run into where we have projects that go over budget by a small margin, and that they still need to come to council. So we've incorporated some wording in there that staff through the CAO can approve up to a certain level for over budget, and then the rest would go back to council. And then credit card purchases. Currently, we do have 2 credit cards in the township. What happens is one gets compromised, then we only have one. So that we're not looking at changing the 2 credit cards, but looking at purchasing cards so that we can use them more for online purchases, as well as small purchases, might be as low as $12. Right now, it requires 3 signatures, which is a little extensive for the low purchases. So what we've also added into this policy that is not in the current policy is just a little more definition around authority and responsibility. So just the council's role to approve the annual budget and to set the policy. The CAO's role to approve the purchases within his authority and oversee the procurement compliance. Myself, the role as the treasurer is I manage the procurement process, ensure policy compliance, and maintain the vendor record list. And then the department managers, they manage their department budgets and then monitor their contract performances. Again, these weren't defined in the current policy. Code and conflicts of interest. We did have this in the current policies. We just updated the wording. So anyone that can influence a contract, an award has a pecuniary interest, and just the steps required for that. We also added in some under suppliers. So we didn't have that in our current policy. So just provide some guidance to suppliers on what we would deem as a conflict of interest or conduct issue. So this compliance and legislation, really just a slide to spell out many of the legislation and acts that are part of the procurement process. So there's many pieces and things that we're watching and when we're tendering and procuring items. And this would not be an exhaustive list, but these are the key areas. Our next section, the standard procurement. We have the request for tender, request for proposal. Requests for tenders are used when we can define the specifications. So it really is generally focused on price. Request for proposals is when we don't have defined specifications. We use a scoring metrics to look at award and not necessarily the lowest price there. Also under standard procurement is expressions of interest, and then the 2 envelope procurement, which I think we've only really used once or maybe twice. I think we used for this building. Again, if it's a really detailed project and we want to look at the scope of the project and what people are proposing before we look at the price. We may have a minimum score required to even consider price. Council approval. So we're not really looking at a significant change there. Council approves if there's a grant and if the requirement of the grant or other legislation, council would approve a contract. The procurement is not compliant with the provisions of the current policy, wasn't part of the approved budget and is over the prescribed thresholds, or the amendments to the contracts are over the prescribed thresholds. What we are looking at and have added in this proposal is that if a project, if the contract comes in and it's 20% over budget up to a maximum of $20,000, it was originally within the annual budget, then it could be approved by the department manager in consultation with the CIO. If the over budget is more than the 20% or exceeds the 20,000, it would then continue to come back to council. Non-standard procurement, there really is no change to what was in the current policy. So there are the circumstances where we can use non-standard procurement. We have the other non-standard procurement with the cooperative purchasing, specialized services, and emergency procurement. We did add some wording in there just about purchasing of used fleet. We didn't have any wording in there specific to the used. Bid evaluation and contract management. So there's a defined process if there's only one bid. Sets out that we'll use an evaluation criteria if there's more than one bid. The current policy laid out what we would use for the evaluation criteria, but it really, each project is slightly different. So that will give us the flexibility to use evaluation criteria specific to the project. And our Schedule D for any bid irregularities, nothing had changed there. Under contract management, We've removed the bid deposits as a requirement. At any time, management or the CAO can decide that we do require a bid deposit as long as we draft it in the bid documents. Bid bonds, again, we've changed the requirements to be in line with the Construction Act rather than having a more aggressive policy. Insurance, the current policy lists out very detailed what our insurance requirements are. So we've taken that out of the policy as far as the details. All the tender documents that go out will spell out what we require for insurance. But it does change from year to year, depending on the insurance company's requirements. So we've removed that to give us more flexibility. Workers' compensation, again, there's no change there. The requirement for clearance certificates or an independent operator status. It talks about the blanket purchase orders and our contractual agreements. So it's some other small sections. We have green procurement, protection of confidential personal information, disposal of surplus assets, the incorporation of accessibility design and criteria, and just our bylaw administration. In the section about the corporate credit card, we're proposing is having purchasing cards. They are virtual purchasing cards. I propose that we issue to each manager a $5,000 maximum limit. They can be issued to staff for specific purposes. So if they're going to a training or something like that, that they can be issued to them for time frame and specific purpose. We'll issue them for reoccurring payments. Again, we're trying to stop from having our actual credit card number out. So we have some things that just automatically get charged to the MasterCard each month. We would then issue this purchasing card for those payments. Again, provides added safety for our card numbers from being stolen and used. Separate detailed policy will be created for the actual use of the purchasing cards. The biggest and main reason for the update is to look at our thresholds. So what we're proposing is for a direct purchase quotes. Right now is anything up to $5,000. We're proposing it to be anything up to $25,000. Then we would go to written quotes, free whenever possible, which currently is between $5,000 and $20,000. We're proposing $25,000 to $75,000. And then looking at the formal tender process, which now is anything over $20,000, that would be anything over $75,000. And then we updated the approval thresholds. And so managers, if it was included in the budget, would approve anything under 50,000. Now would be under 75,000. The CAO approves anything over 50,000. We're proposing to be over 75,000. The CAO, if it's not included in the budget, currently is 50,000, 75,000, and for council not included in the budget was over 50,000, and we're proposing 75,000. So a little bit about the Buy Ontario Act. So it has come into play. So for vehicles, it came into effect April 13th. This applies for any light duty passenger vehicle less than 4,500 kilograms, and specialty vehicles are exempt. So if they are equipped or altered for special reasons, then they would be exempt from this policy. So if we look at the CBO's truck, that we need to replace it, then we would be looking at a tier 1, and we would need to ensure if it works, we would fill it through tier 1. If a vehicle in that list does not work for our purposes, then we can look at tier 2. But we have to have reasons that we're going to have to provide to the province as to why we didn't go with tier 1 and why we're going with tier 2, or if we're not going with either one of them, we need to provide explanation as to why we don't do that. And then the last part of the Buy Ontario Act is the capital infrastructure, which came into play May 15th. So this applies to all goods and services for capital infrastructure projects, construction projects. So now there will be an evaluation advantage applied based on the amount of Ontario goods and services. So this gets a little more complex. I won't go into big detail, but there'll be two methodologies. There's one where there'll be a price adjustment for evaluation purposes only for whatever bidder has the highest Ontario content. And then for the bigger contracts where there's scoring, then there would be scoring points specific to those with the highest Ontario content. So it's a bit of a learning process. The directive is not super clear. Everyone's still kind of working through what this looks like, but we were told in a couple of sessions that there will be reporting required to the province. We don't know what that looks like. We're not sure what will be involved for that. And non-compliance with the act could impact your funding. So they didn't say which funding, so I don't know if it's OMPF, if it's OSIP. They didn't say which funding, but we are not compliant and choose not to follow the Buy Ontario Act, then our funding could be impacted as well. Buy Ontario.
Councillor Hermer.
Kelly, under the Buy Ontario Act, when it comes to vehicles, will that tender require the VIN number to start with the 2?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So that means you're gonna buy a Silverado before you're gonna buy an F-150 or a Ram.
And so what this also, the Buy Ontario Act means is that there is a chance we will be paying more for either vehicles or for procurement for capital projects, because it's not so much on price. There is, and so that was a lot of the discussions. Under the capital, if the project would be 25% more than what you would pay for the lower, then there's some room to move, but essentially a project could be 20% more. But if they meet the Buy Ontario provisions and the scoring, then it's where we'll be awarding.
That'll probably be offset by Trump's tariffs, so.
All right. Councillor Inglis?
Can I ask a question, a definition here in your section 8.3 says, new policy, blah, 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 will require a bid bond and then a 50% labor material bond and a 50% performance bond. That sounds like 200% to me.
Oh, so that's our current.
This is new policy. Seems to me this is all under the definition of new policy.
So the current policy requires those bid deposits and those bid bonds.
What's the difference between a bid bond and labor materials and performance bond? Are they the same thing?
So a bid bond is amount put forward to actually bid on the project. And then the bid bonds get turned in for these performance bonds and labor and material bonds. So our current policy was asking for 100%. We're following the Construction Act, which only requires a 50% bond for the contract.
So for example, on a $600,000 bid, the bidder requires $300,000 security to bid, plus $600,000.
That bid security like the bid deposit would then go back and it gets replaced with bid bonds. Or it gets replaced with the labor and material bonds and the performance bonds at 50%.
The two of which add up to 100%. They're 50% each.
No, it'd be 50% of, so there's 50% for your labor and material and 50% for performance.
Okay.
And that's the way the Construction Act is written.
Look at it this way. So when you bid a job as a contractor or a supplier, the bid bond is guaranteed by a bonding company that you're gonna sign this contract. And if you don't, then the owner, which would be us, can call in that bond and take that amount. So if you're submitting it and someone's guaranteeing it, you know, they probably have your first warrant signed up or something. They're really strict with bond companies.
What about me?
I'm sorry. As a tenant, you made it right. I apologize. You weren't.
It's okay. Kelly, and 6.5, the over budget. It mentions that 20% or under 20,000. Shouldn't it be and? Because, take an example, a project of a contract of $300,000. 20% is 60,000. This or that, it should be and, because or the least of, right? Or is confusing. We could choose, the CEO could choose the 60,000 as it's written here, or the 20%. So you would go with the 60,000 instead of the 20,000 stipulated. Could go with the 20%.
I know what you're saying, not the intent for sure.
Yeah.
The intent was that up to 20% or a maximum of 20.
Or a maximum. There you go.
Yeah, so in the policy, it is for 20,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So 20% or 20,000. I choose the 20%, which is 60,000, and I go ahead. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can amend that for you.
Okay. Yeah. I'm all for the Ontario, by Ontario. I'm also for paying a premium for that. But the legislation, if I understand it correctly, stipulates that if there is a non-compliance, there will be a risk of withdrawing grants or stuff like that. Is there currently anything or in the pipeline that we know of, anything at risk for us in North Frontenac that will be affecting this?
Not that I know of. They haven't specified what they might fall back as far as grants or funding. I think some of it might be, part of our annual funding that they were looking at, but they haven't specified. They just advised that non-compliance could result in funding concerns. Right now, I don't think we have any projects pending that or any concerns, and we are trying our best to incorporate it in our tender document.
Okay, and is there a process or is there any stipulation again in there for staff to report on that if there is any risk of non-compliance?
Report to
council or anywhere, or just mention it somewhere? Or?
So not in the legislation. There's nothing about reporting. Certainly if we felt we were at risk of non-compliance concern, we would bring it to council. In the tender documents, it is required that they do a supply chain plan, as well as an attestation that what they've provided us in their tender document is true as far as their Ontario and Canadian content. Some of the questions are, do we have to prove? The response right now is we don't have to prove that what they've said. So we're taking their word when they do the attestation. So that is going to be all part of the tendering process now, is the supply chain plan, as well as an attestation that what they provided is accurate.
My last question regarding the 25,000 threshold approval. It's raised from 5,000 to 25,000. Again, is there a process of documenting that decision? Because it's a single source decision from now, right? It's to approve a 25,000 procurement of any. Is it well documented? I'm not aware of. I don't know. Is it well documented and reviewable by who? The council, yourself? How is this process?
So currently the process is up to 5,000, so managers, will go out and they may get quotes, they may not, they may, have a source for that. And then, we would do a purchase order for anything over 5,000, so then the documentation comes forward that way. But we don't have a formal, process, I guess, up to that stage with the written quotes. All the quotes are provided, to us. To keep in a file so that we have the quotes that were provided. For when we got 3 written quotes, they're used to be provided.
So council has no say whatsoever in that process, not even reviewing it or checking it like.
No, because we go back to council's role is to set the policy. So they would not look at individual contracts or like awarding individual contracts. They would not be reviewing individual contracts and awards.
Also have the auditors. Great. So because I have a few years on the belt, I've seen this before, like many years ago. This is a lot more complex. And first time someone took your government into court, and they won, so that because you were giving an unfair advantage to Ontario companies over US companies or other province companies. This is a little different. So we'll see where it all goes, but we have to deal with it as it is. So I have, every year the auditors go through and they look at things, and that's one of the things I know they look at. And so, and it has to be documented. And it's just kind of the way of the world. Things are, you just going, try and buy anything. This is what the price was. Now it's this much, so, and it doesn't seem to be justified, but if your family or whatever, you're working for a living or working for a paycheck, it's a little different. Okay. Anybody else have any final questions? Corey, go ahead.
I just want to, this is really awesome. I remember, if I maybe told this story, but when I started here 19 years ago, anything over $100, we had to get 3 quotes for. So honestly, I can remember trying to order paint to do a bathroom, 3 cans of paint, and I'd have to call 3 different hardware stores, and sometimes I'd have to wait a week for them to get back to me to give me a price of 3 cans of paint. So it was delaying. So this is just to a bigger scale now of, this is awesome. So if you guys, this is really, a lot of this is really labor intensive. So this is a big, for us, this is pretty huge. So it's a great opportunity to save on staff time and get these projects done than we've been able to in the past.
It also puts a tremendous responsibility on the manager to get it right. Okay, in favor of the resolution? Mike?
1 second, are we correcting that or are we keeping it as is?
So we'll correct it. I'm not sure what the right process is because we have the bylaw later in the meeting.
Or do we is it we'll bring it back at the next meeting?
So we can bring it back to the next meeting. I will not be at the next meeting. I think it's just to
Just
clarify that
adding the
wording.
word.
Well, let's correct that right now.
Okay.
And then we can pass the resolution as amended.
Sorry for that.
No. The intent was there, so that's perfect. And I just want to take 1 minute to, Jean Wemp is here and she did a lot of work on putting this policy together and some research and a lot of time. And she did a lot of hard work on the procurement process. So I just want to take time to thank her as well.
Since we're waiting, off the top of your head, you know how much we spent on credit cards? On credit cards, how much we purchase?
Usually under 20,000 a month. 15 to 20,000 a month.
So the reason I'm asking now, so my next question is, do we have a rewards program with those credit cards? Why don't we look at that and get 2% back? Many municipalities do that.
We can look into that for sure.
Go ahead and read the amended resolution.
Moved by Counselor Inglis, seconded by Counselor Hermer. Be it resolved, the council receives for information the treasurer's administrative report entitled Procurement Policy Update, and that council will consider a bylaw later in the meeting with the amendment to section 6.5 and 6.6 to include maximum.
Good point. In favor? Carried. We don't need a legal opinion on this, do we? Okay. Okay, so item F.
Moved by Counselor Inglis, seconded by Counselor Hermer. Be it resolved, the council receives for information the Public Works Manager's administrative report entitled Request from Lanark Highlands to Access the Mississippi Household Hazardous Waste Depot, and the council agrees in principle to the potential shared use of the Household Hazardous Waste Depot at the Mississippi Waste Site, subject to acceptable terms and cost recovery being negotiated, and the council authorizes the Public Works Manager to negotiate the terms of a shared access agreement with Lanark Highland, and that the Public Works Manager will report back to council at a future meeting regarding the status of negotiations for council's consideration.
Darwin, you have a presentation?
Mr. Mayor, I do not have a presentation,
Thank you.
but I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Yeah. Look, I got 3 times that I caught to. So, comments, Counselor Inglis.
Would you say that North Frontenac is becoming a hazardous waste center, at least in Ontario?
No, I wouldn't look at it that way. I just look at any waste we collect, within our own boundaries or from our neighbors, benefit the environment and everything. So, and Mississippi is a site where we have some capacity. And what I have in mind is something similar to what we do at 506 with Addington Highlands.
Counselor Good?
You just answered my question. I was wondering if we had capacity for it.
That's the site I use at 509, and it's on the waste, the hazard waste is not overly busy. So. In favor of this resolution? Carried. Okay. So item 10G, new grant opportunity from Hydro One Community Partnership Grant.
Moved by Counselor Hermer, seconded by Counselor Inglis. Be resolved, the council receives for information the Public Works Manager's administrative report entitled Grant Opportunity, Hydro One Community Partnership Grant, and the council approves submitting an application for funding to Hydro One to purchase rose-closed tailored signs and arrows, and that the Chief Administrative Officer is authorized to sign the Hydro One Community Partnership Grant application for funding and agreement if successful, and that staff will update council at a future meeting regarding the status of the Hydro One Community Partnership Grant application.
Comments? In favor? Carried. Okay, item 11, external committees. So Committee of Adjustment Planning and Advisory Committee.
Moved by Counselor Hermer, seconded by Counselor Inglis. Be it resolved that council receives for information the minutes of a meeting of the Committee of Adjustment Planning Advisory Committee held April 27th, 2026.
Comments? In favor? Carried. Just on that, if you go back through and read Brooks' report from their conferences, looks like a lot of training, maybe even possibly going to some of the training. It'll be the next council because it's getting pretty intense that we'll have to look at. Okay, so Economic Development Task Force, item 11B.
Moved by Counselor Inglis, seconded by Counselor Hermer. Be it resolved, the council receives for information the minutes of the Economic Development Task Force meeting held on May 19th, 2026.
Comments? In favor? Carried. Does anyone wish to give notice of a motion? Seeing none. We have no motions of which a written notice has previously been provided. And that brings us to the introduction, I'm sorry, council portfolio verbal reports. I'm just going to take a minute here to pull this up. Well, thank you for your patience. So the first one up is myself as the mayor. Also, is on the topic. We'll start seeing a number of signs show up. You'll see things on the social media. I've got 5 signs for sale and 10 minutes later, they're gone. So Brooke and I have started to work on the background on some of this, and we'll have a report for you next meeting. That's the intent. Scott Reed has a new petition. You could go to his website, scottreed.ca. You can sign the petition, and that will lead you to another petition, which is electronic one in Parliament. And I urge everyone, if you're interested in this at all and you don't want to see it all put here, make your opinions known. Please take a look at that and sign it. The new petition is the E7458 for what it's worth. Next week, I have Fund and Municipal Services Information Session. I actually have 2 of them on the 16th. And that evening, I have a Frontenac Business Services AGM. The next morning, I have a Frontenac City Council meeting in Glen Burnie. On the 20th, I'm at the Lions Club to help them celebrate their emergency management, the whole building generator system. It's a great program. They've done so well with it. On the 24th, I think it is, I have a meeting with North Frontenac Lake Association Alliance. So that's good. And there's probably something else I forgot, but that's where we're at right now. So the next one is Councillor Good.
Shall I know to report?
Councillor Haig.
Nothing to report except for the health board. Our meeting is next week, so I have a report for you next week.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Hooten.
We did not have an MVCA board meeting on Monday. We have an MVCA watershed tour, which we viewed some of the conservation areas there. And we also went to Amont and saw the dam that Amont has. It's municipally owned. It's really quite interesting. They make $500,000 a year net profit. That goes right back to the municipality. So it was an interesting day. And I have my first Lake Association meeting this Saturday at Malcolm Lake.
Okay, that will take us to Councillor Hermer.
Nothing to report.
Councillor Fowler.
Yes, today we had a meeting with the Eastern Ontario Trails Alliance. Nothing really special came out of the meeting except to confirm that our agreements have been signed. Our next meeting is going to be in August. We're going to skip July. For the seniors and law enforcement, there's another presentation in Piccadilly on June 17, and it's on the holistic health as well. And that was the same topic that was at Snow Road, which really was getting into a routine for exercise. Our Frontenac Ontario OPP board, we have a meeting on June 18th, and I'll be at that meeting. That's all I have. Thanks.
Councillor Inglis.
Nothing to report right now. I assume that Sunday Lake, Palmerston and Canado meetings are coming up in starting in about 3 weeks.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. That brings us to item 15, introduction and reading of the bylaws.
Moved by Councillor Inglis, seconded by Councillor Hermer. Be resolved that leave be given to the mover to introduce the following bylaws that have been circulated to all members of council. Bylaw 2026-35, deeming bylaw, Shore Road Allowance per. Bylaw 2026-36, to adopt a procurement policy, and that these bylaws be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
Comments? In favor? Carry. That brings us to the public forum session. We'll start with in council and then, in the council chambers, and then we'll go to online. Just as a reminder, you're free to make comments about anything that's on the agenda. It has to be directly related. If that, your comments and questions, you're looking for some direction or whatever else, please feel free to make them at the same time. So anybody want to make comments? Seeing none. Kelly, do we have anyone online?
If there's anyone online that wishes to make comment, please use the raise hand feature. Seeing none.
Thank you, everyone. So that takes us to item 17, a closed session.
Moved by Counselor Inglis, seconded by Counselor Hermer. Be it resolved, the council retires to closed session at 7:12 PM to adopt minutes of a closed meeting held May 21st, 2026. Discuss a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and to consider advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose.
In favor? Carried. So ladies and gentlemen, we have to clear the council chambers. Thank you for coming tonight. Welcome back, everyone. Council has risen from their closed meeting in which we adopted minutes of the closed meeting held May 21st, 2026. We discussed the proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. And we considered advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose.
Moved by Counselor Hermer, seconded by Counselor Inglis. Be it resolved, the council approves the purchase of property on Buckshot Lake Road for a drainage easement, and that the estimated cost to purchase the property are approximately $18,000 plus applicable taxes, which includes the purchase of the property, legal fees, survey, registration costs, and design, and that council authorizes the chief administrative officer to sign the agreement and legal documents required to purchase the drainage easement, and that all costs will be charged to the budget of the approved capital project, Buckshot Lake Road.
Carried.
Moved by Counselor Hermer, seconded by Counselor Inglis. Be it resolved that bylaw 2026-37, being a bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings of council for its regular meeting held June 11th, 2026, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
Final comments? In favor? Carried. My apologies for getting the items out of line. Now the adjournment.
Moved by Counselor Hermer, seconded by Counselor Inglis. Be it resolved that council adjourns the meeting at 7:35 PM until July 9th, 2026, or at the call of the chair.
In favor? Carried. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.